New videos every day.
Life, wisdom.
Dr. Bellonzi, there's a lot of confusion about protein out there. Is it possible to get enough protein in a vegetarian diet? Is it possible to actually eat too much protein? What are the facts and maybe the myths about protein that you think people should know about?
Well, I think the biggest myth is that people don't necessarily get enough based on earlier studies of nitrogen balance. There's this idea that you can actually eat too much protein, and that's not really proven out. Now, if I have kidneys that are damaged or not functioning well, it does put a little bit more of a load on them, but there are also studies showing that higher protein diets actually help the kidneys to function better. So you can't right out say that if I eat more protein, I'm going to hurt my kidneys or I'm going to do damage to myself. The body readily uses protein for energy. It can use protein for other things. It's really about getting enough protein. And it doesn't really matter what would matter is perhaps how your ancestors lived. So if you want to find the diet that's going to work best for you, it probably goes back to your epigenetics, meaning that the way that your ancestors ate their diet is probably going to have reflected on their genetics, and it's going to work possibly better for you. So that's a consideration. But we can get our protein from several different sources, and whether or not you want to eat animal sources or non-animal sources, it's a matter of getting enough protein in order to have what you need for the needs of the body.
Right. So in terms of good sources of protein, of course, the first thing that people think of is meat and animal products. What are some other sources of protein that people maybe don't think about?
Well, all of our foods have a certain amount of protein in them. We've got the macronutrients. You've got carbohydrates, you've got fats, and then you have proteins. And so whether we're talking about vegetables or grains or other types of foods, everything has a bit of protein in it. If you're going to eat animal protein, in some ways it's a little bit easier because the animal went out and gathered nutrients and put together a complete protein for you, and you can consume the animal and then get the nutrients that you require. If you're not going to eat animal sources, then you have to be the gatherer. So you're going to have to likely eat more of a variety of different foods, complement your proteins so you have the right types of amino acids in the right amounts, make up for deficiencies that one plant might not have over another. And then there's other nutrients you probably have to go out and gather as well. It can be done either way, but the idea is that you get enough of each macronutrient.
So you mentioned that maybe there's confusion about how much protein we're really supposed to eat. What can you give us in terms of a guideline so that we know, well, how much is too much? How much do we need to be eating? Or maybe how do we know if we're not getting enough protein?
There are ways to actually measure if you're not getting enough protein. We do it in the clinic quite a bit. You can do blood levels of amino acids. We use that test quite often. You can look at even what you would get in a regular physical. They'll look at the serum protein levels. So you can get indicators if you're getting enough. But it also comes down to, are you building tissue effectively? Can you perform as an athlete and things like that? So there are a number of studies, and most studies point to probably about 1 gram per pound of body weight as a good amount to take in each day if you're physically active. If you're sedentary, if you sit on the couch all day, you can probably get away with less. Some people probably will utilize more, but we can't necessarily just go by nitrogen balance as a study because it's hard to see all of the losses, especially in an active person. So as far as actual measurement, it is difficult to set a number. But again, an average, as far as sports physiology and other studies, is about 1 gram per pound each day of protein intake.
Right. Okay. So in terms of, a lot of people are asking the question on our channel, is there a way for vegetarians to get enough protein? And you said that yes, it's just probably going to take them being a little bit more educated about it, eating more different varieties of foods to make sure that they're getting enough of everything. What is maybe another, guideline that people should know? You gave the 1 gram of protein per body weight. I think that's a great guideline. What else should people know about protein and maybe the potential dangers of if they're eating too much protein? Is that a danger? Is there a way of knowing?
I don't know if I'd really call it a danger. Again, if I have a certain pathology, such as a kidney disease. My kidneys are not functioning very well. Many doctors will then tell those people not to eat as much protein because it puts more work to the kidneys. But there are people who have eaten protein-only diets for years and done quite well, actually improved their health. And we know of societies that ate basically a protein-based diet and not much plant or anything else. But there are also societies that were more on the vegetarian side. So I don't know that you can necessarily just eat too much protein, but what you want is, for health, is to have a balance of those macronutrients. So I think more people struggle with getting enough. And the reason that I have that opinion is I find most people, especially that come into the clinic, especially in our society here, have such bad digestion that even though they may consume a lot of protein, they aren't even able to digest it, break it down, and actually assimilate the amino acids, which puts them in a deficiency state. So I find a lot of people, even though they eat a lot of protein, don't get enough for their body to work.
Very interesting. So one of the things that's kind of stood out to me is it seems that there's a lot of fixation on protein and people going, man, am I getting enough protein? Am I getting too much protein? But one of the things that has been a consideration for myself is I kind of looked at my diet and went, well, why am I just fixating on this idea of protein? Aren't there other things in the diet that are also, really important? And so, for instance, there's a lot of people who I know who are meat eaters and who maybe are athletic, and there's maybe what is, a dependence on animal products in the diet as the bulk of calories. Is that a potential health danger, or is that something safe? Is it possible to eat too much animal protein?
It is possible because we're lucky in the society. We have readily available vegetables and fruits and even grain products. So if I'm going to be truly healthy and really seek wellness, I need a lot of different nutrients, not just protein, not just amino acids. There are phytonutrients, there are plant chemicals that I may only need a small amount of, but without those plant chemicals, my body's not going to function as well as it could. And I'm not going to take somebody who's a top athlete and tell them not to eat any carbohydrate because they won't be able to perform at that high level just by burning protein. Our body's actually designed to use fats as a fuel source, but it will readily use protein. But I want to make sure I have enough good fats for other reasons, but also as a fuel source. So it's more of getting all of the nutrients in that will allow the body to be at optimum function. That's what health is about.
So really a balance of all these different...
Absolutely. Yeah, that's going to be the healthiest choice.
So you mentioned that if we were going to have a vegetarian diet, for instance, that we would need a good variety of different kinds of foods. But can you give us some specific sources of protein that maybe people don't think about as good sources of protein that would be good vegetarian sources?
Sure. There are a lot of supplements, but ideally you're going to start with whole food. So there are many sources, again, of proteins, but they may have to be complemented. In other words, one non-animal source may have certain amino acids, and then you complement a different one that has a different mix of amino acids, and then together they're more what we call complete, like an animal protein would be, and it can be done. So I've got the legumes, which are a common source for people. Those are the beans and things like that. So a lot of people utilize soy, which there's a lot of controversy about, especially on how it's prepared, because if soy is naturally fermented, it's safer than what we do with processing. But soy can be an okay source of protein. So can other legume sources. Peanuts are legumes, so nuts and seeds as well. But there are a number of beans, especially lentils, that have a fairly high protein content and can be complemented with other things. Then again, as I just mentioned, you've got nuts and seeds as another source, which have fats, but also some protein in them. But even vegetables do contain some protein and some higher amounts than others. So I can consume those as well, especially the grains from plants. Quinoa has a very high protein content. So it's a good staple for somebody who's going to be a vegetarian. But I'm going to have to think about all of that if I'm not going to consume an animal product. And beyond that, then there are a lot of refined proteins. Some are better than others. You do have to look at how these things are processed if you're not going to get it from whole foods. So whey protein, of course, comes from milk, casein as well. They can be good sources of protein as long as I don't have an allergic response or a problem with milk. but also how were they processed? If I just get simple whey protein, it may just be dried milk, and it may not even be that valuable to me. But if I get it cold processed and isolated correctly, there are some great studies on whey protein and its ability to help the immune system and help build muscle effectively. So either, depending on the processing, it can be a real advantage. But there's egg sources, of course. There are other sources from plants, such as hemp protein. There are soy protein concentrates. There's also pea protein. There's brown rice protein. So there's a lot of different choices that we have. But the question to ask is, what is the quality of this protein? How is it isolated from the plant or from the animal? And am I going to get the value from it that I want?
Right. And then when we're looking at animal sources of protein, you mentioned earlier, so the animal is actually going out and in their diet, they're consuming all of these different nutrients so that they can come together and they create this really great source of protein, which then we eat them and we're able to get that. What is the importance of, the quality of the diet that the animal was fed? We talk a lot about, trying to recommend grass-fed meat products and things like that. Is that an important factor?
It's probably the most important factor. Is the animal you're consuming a healthy animal? We know for a fact now, it's been studied, that grain-fed beef, for example, is not a healthy animal at all. It has a different protein structure, being grain-fed. It has different fats. So I don't even know if I can call it a healthy animal or healthy for our consumption. But if the animal was out walking around and eating grass and basically taking in its normal diet, then it actually has a different protein structure and a different fat ratio. So you actually have an animal that is healthy for you to consume. It does absolutely make a difference. I'd much prefer to eat an animal that was out as an herbivore eating grass because that animal's healthy and is going to confer the healthy nutrients to me.
Right. And I think you make a really good point, which is that if we want to have a healthy food, well, then if it's an animal that we're eating, then we want to eat an animal that was healthy when it was alive. And most of these factory farmed animals, they're pumped with antibiotics.
Growth factors, antibiotics, you're getting all of that along with not the greatest protein source anyway.
Right. Well, thank you so very much for this information. And I look forward to doing some future videos with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you enjoyed this video and you will leave a comment letting me know what you think is the best source of protein in your diet and if you're a meat eater or not. Please be sure to subscribe to the Psychetruth channel. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much for watching.